The Arizona sun rose red that morning, bleeding across the desert horizon like a wound. Cole Braddock rode out early, his horse kicking dust over the dry riverbed as the dawn wind tugged at his hat. He'd been up since before first light, chasing the trail of a stray calf that had wandered off during the night storm. The country was wild and raw out here, broken hills, mesquite, and long stretches of silence. Cole had learned to love that silence. It was the only thing that didn't lie. He reined in when he spotted something odd near the rocks. Not animal tracks, but boot prints, and smaller ones beside them. Then the drag marks. Something heavy had been pulled across the sand toward the reeds. His hand went to the revolver at his side, but he didn't draw it yet. The land had a way of teaching patience. Rashness got a man buried faster than bullets did. As he followed the trail, the smell hit him. Blood and smoke. He found a torn shawl snagged on a mesquite branch, crimson against the green thorns. A little farther down, by the shallow bend of the river, he saw her. A young woman lay half in the water, half out. Her dark hair spread like ink across the sand, her dress torn and burned. For a moment he thought she was dead. Then she stirred. A faint movement, her fingers clutching weakly at the mud. Cole slid off his horse and knelt beside her. "Easy," he said quietly, though she probably didn't understand. "You're all right now." Her eyelids fluttered open. She looked at him, and what he saw in her eyes wasn't confusion. It was terror. She flinched, tried to crawl away, whispering something sharp and urgent in a tongue he didn't know. He lifted his hands, palms open. "I ain't here to hurt you." That's when he saw her arm. Blood-soaked cloth wrapped around it, and something, a broken shaft maybe, stuck out through the bandage. It wasn't a clean wound. The flesh around it was angry and black. Cole reached for the bandage, intending to see how bad it was. That's when she said it. Her voice cracked through the still air, hoarse but desperate. "Please, don't pull it." He froze. The words came out in English, clear enough to stop him cold. He met her eyes, wide, glassy with fever, and for the first time he saw more than fear there. There was pleading, warning. He eased back, his hands trembling slightly. "All right," he said softly. "All right, I won't." For a long minute they just stayed there, her breathing shallow, his mind racing. The wind shifted, bringing the faint sound of distant thunder. Or maybe not thunder, maybe hooves, soldiers patrolling the far ridge. The wars with the Apache had left more than scars. They'd left ghosts that still rode with the living. He looked down at her again. Whatever had happened, she'd been caught in something terrible. Maybe she was the last of a raiding band. Maybe she was a runaway. But none of that mattered now. Cole tore a strip from his own shirt, soaked it in the river, and pressed it gently against her wound, careful not to touch the thing jutting from it. Her body relaxed slightly, her breathing steadier. "You'll be all right," he murmured, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. When he lifted her into his arms, she winced but didn't fight. She just stared past him, toward the river, her lips moving soundlessly. He caught only fragments. A name, maybe, or a prayer. Cole mounted up with her in front of him, the mare uneasy beneath their weight. As he turned toward home, the first rays of the sun struck the river, turning it gold. But where they had just been, the water ran dark, as if something unseen had bled into it, and far off behind them, the wind carried a whisper he couldn't understand. The ranch sat low against the hills, a weathered sprawl of timber and dust-stained windows that had seen better years. Braddock Ranch, once full of hired hands, now just Cole and Tom Avery, an old cowhand too stubborn to die and too loyal to leave. When Cole rode into the yard with the wounded girl slumped in his arms, Tom came stomping out of the barn, squinting into the sunlight. "Good Lord, Cole," he rasped. "What have you got there?" Cole swung down slow, his boots grinding in the dirt. "Found her by the river. Shot up bad. Looks Apache." Tom's weathered face tightened. "Apache? You out of your mind bringing her here?" "Army's still hunting what's left of 'em up north. You'll have soldiers knocking down your door." Cole ignored him. "She's hurt. She needs a roof and clean water." He carried her inside, through the narrow hallway that smelled of tobacco and old coffee, into the spare room his wife once used for sewing before she died. He laid the girl, Naya, he'd later learn, on the bed, her skin hot with fever. Her lips trembled as she muttered in her own tongue, words that sounded like prayers or warnings. Tom lingered in the doorway, hat in hand. "Cole, you can't fix the world." "She's trouble. You see it same as I do." Cole looked at him. "Ain't asking to fix the world, Tom, just her arm." He peeled back the blood-stiffened bandage and grimaced. The thing lodged beneath the skin wasn't a simple arrow shard. It looked carved, etched with faint markings that caught the lamplight like veins of iron. He could smell infection, but also something else, sharp and metallic, like burned sage. Naya stirred, her voice cracking. "Don't pull it!" Cole froze. The same words, spoken clearer now. Her eyes opened, locking onto his, fierce despite her weakness. "If you pull it, they come." He didn't know who they were, but her fear was raw enough to silence him. "All right," he said quietly. "It stays." He rewrapped the wound with fresh cloth, layered it tight to stop the bleeding, and fed her a little water from a tin cup. Her hand brushed his wrist, delicate, trembling. "You helped me," she whispered. "Why?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "'Cause you're human same as me. That's reason enough." Her eyes softened, just barely, before she drifted back into fevered sleep. Hours later, dusk crawled through the windows, turning the floorboards to red. Cole sat at the table cleaning his rifle, but his mind wasn't on it. The sound of her labored breathing filled the quiet house. The wind picked up outside, whistling through the eaves like a ghost's sigh. Tom came in with 2 mugs of coffee and dropped into the opposite chair. "You think she's cursed," he said flatly. Cole didn't answer. "Old tribes had ways of binding spirits," Tom went on. "Things they didn't want loose. Maybe that arrow's one of them. You pull it, maybe you don't just bleed her. Maybe you bleed the world." Cole stared into his coffee, the steam curling like smoke from a dying fire. "You talk like you've seen it." "I've seen enough to keep my hands out of business that ain't mine." They sat in silence a long while. Then Naya screamed, a sharp animal cry that made both men jump to their feet. Cole rushed into the room. She was thrashing on the bed, eyes wide open but unseeing, her hand gripping her wounded arm. He caught her shoulders, trying to calm her. "Easy now. You're safe." Her voice came out in a whisper, but every word was clear. "If you pull it, it calls them." Then she went still, limp as a doll. Cole listened to her ragged breathing until it steadied again. He looked at Tom, standing pale in the doorway. "Tomorrow," Cole said, jaw set, "we'll find a doctor." But in the pit of his stomach he already knew. No doctor in Arizona could cure what was buried under that skin. Night came hard and heavy over the desert, laying its cold hand across the ranch. The wind had died to nothing. Even the coyotes were silent. Cole sat by the fire, the orange light flickering across his face, a Bible open in front of him, though he wasn't reading a word. Upstairs, he could hear Naya shifting restlessly in her fever. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo too loud in the stillness. Tom had gone to bed hours ago, muttering that he'd sooner sleep in the barn than share a roof with witchcraft. Cole had tried to laugh it off, but the joke wouldn't come. He couldn't shake the memory of Naya's eyes when she'd said those words again. "It calls them." The lamp sputtered once, then steadied. Outside, something stirred among the horses. A sudden crash, hooves thundering, a panicked whinny. Cole was on his feet in an instant, grabbing his rifle and stepping into the cold night. The stars were sharp as knives overhead. The corral gate hung open, though he could have sworn he'd latched it. 2 horses circled madly, eyes rolling white, their bodies slick with sweat. "Easy, girl," he muttered, lowering his voice as he approached. But the animals wouldn't settle. They kept jerking toward the ridge as if watching something only they could see. Cole followed their gaze but found nothing, just a stretch of moonlit desert, still and empty. A low hum reached his ears then, soft like the droning of a hornet trapped in a jar. It came from the house, from her room. He turned and hurried back inside, boots striking the floorboards. The hum grew louder as he climbed the stairs. When he opened the door, it stopped. Naya lay half upright in the bed, her skin slick with sweat. The air around her felt wrong, thick, charged, like the air before a storm. Her bandaged arm trembled violently, the cloth pulsing as though something beneath it moved on its own. Cole froze in the doorway. "Miss," he said softly. "You awake?" Her head snapped toward him, eyes wide but distant, pupils blown wide like she was staring through him. "Don't come close," she whispered. "They smell your breath," Cole hesitated. "Who?" "There's no one here but me," she shuddered. "You don't see." "They walk in wind and shadow, bound in my blood until the arrow's gone." Her voice cracked. A tear slipped down her cheek. "You must not touch it. If you do—" "They'll hear." Cole swallowed hard, forcing calm. "All right," he said gently. "You got my word. I won't touch it." She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her expression softened, as if she saw the truth in him. "You're a good man," she murmured. "But good men die fastest." Then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed into sleep. Cole stood there a long time, listening. The wind began to pick up again, brushing against the windows like fingertips. And faint beneath it, he could have sworn he heard whispers, just beyond the edge of sound. Words in no tongue he knew, circling the ranch like wolves scenting prey. He lit every lamp in the house that night. Tom found him at dawn, sitting in the kitchen, eyes red, rifle across his knees. "You hear it too?" Cole asked quietly. Tom didn't answer right away. He just rubbed his face, pale and drawn. "Something walked the yard last night," he said finally. "Didn't see it, just felt it." "Like a cold hand slid through me." Cole said nothing. His gaze drifted toward the stairs where the girl slept, and to the faint hum that still seemed to linger in the air. Whatever haunted her wasn't done. It was only waiting. The morning sun rose slow and uncertain, veiled behind thin clouds that dimmed the desert's usual glare. The ranch felt different that day, quieter, heavier, as though the night had left a residue on the air that sunlight couldn't burn away. Cole poured black coffee into a chipped tin cup, his hands unsteady. He hadn't slept. The whispering wind still echoed in his ears, soft and cruel, carrying words he couldn't quite catch. Tom hadn't said much either. He looked older than he had the night before, shoulders bent, eyes darting toward the girl's room every few minutes, like he expected her to start screaming again. Naya had been silent since dawn. Her fever had broken, but her face was drawn pale, her lips cracked, her eyes shadowed. Cole brought her a cup of water and sat beside the bed. She looked up at him with the weariness of someone far older than her years. "You didn't sleep," she murmured. He shook his head. "Neither did the horses." Her lips twitched faintly, not quite a smile. "They see what you don't." Cole frowned. "You keep talking about things I can't see. You said something walks when the wind blows. You said if I touch that arrow, it calls them. Who's them, Naya?" Her eyes darted toward the window. The curtain fluttered slightly in the breeze, but she didn't look back. "Spirits. The ones buried under your land. The soldiers took our land, but they did not take the ones sleeping beneath it." He rubbed his jaw. "You mean your people's dead?" "No." She met his gaze now, and the intensity in her dark eyes made him flinch. "Not dead. Not yet bound, you see?" She lifted her injured arm weakly. "The arrow was not meant to kill me. It was meant to hold them, to bind them in flesh, in pain. The shaman carved it with his blood and his fire. The one who pulls it," she paused, her breath catching, "frees them." Cole stared, his mind refusing to accept it, yet some part of him, the part raised on old frontier superstition, felt the truth trembling under her words. He rose and paced the room. "You're talking about magic, curses, all that old campfire nonsense." She watched him quietly, then said, "You heard them last night, didn't you?" He froze. "The whispers in the wind," she continued softly. "The cold breath on your neck. You saw the horses run? You think that was dream?" Cole turned toward the window, jaw tight. The truth was he had felt something. The air had turned colder when she screamed. The darkness outside hadn't been just dark. It had moved. "You said a shaman made that arrow," he said finally. "Why you?" Her gaze fell. Because I am his blood, his granddaughter. When the soldiers came, he bound the spirits of our ancestors to protect our people. But they turned wild. They fed on hate and pain, so he sealed them inside me, through the arrow, through my blood. I was to carry them, to keep them asleep, until— She hesitated, eyes glistening. Until a man of mercy freed them. Cole's chest tightened. That man's not gonna be me, he said, almost to convince himself. I ain't pulling nothing. You can rest easy on that. But her gaze didn't ease. Mercy kills faster than cruelty. The kind heart never listens to warning. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dust across the yard. The sound of the corral gate creaking echoed through the walls. Cole turned toward the noise. But when he looked back, Naya had already closed her eyes again, her hand clutching the bandaged arm as though she could feel the restless spirits stirring beneath her skin. He stood there, torn between disbelief and dread, while the lamp flame beside the bed flickered and bowed, as if something unseen had just passed between them. By the third day, the fever had returned. The girl's breath came in ragged, shallow bursts, and her skin gleamed with sweat that smelled faintly of iron. Cole sat beside her, sleeves rolled up, face drawn with exhaustion. He had tried everything. Fresh water, clean bandages, crushed herbs Tom swore could pull out poison, but nothing stopped the sickness crawling up her arm. The veins around the wound had turned black, spidering toward her shoulder like cracks in burned glass. Tom hovered in the doorway, hat in hand. She's dying, Cole, you know it. Best you let the Lord take her now. Cole didn't answer. He dipped a cloth in cool water and brushed it over her brow. Her eyelids fluttered, and she whispered something too soft to catch. He leaned closer. Please. Her cracked lips trembled. Don't pull it. The words hit him like a hammer. The same plea. Always the same. Cole swallowed hard. I ain't gonna pull it, he said, though his voice shook. But that thing's killing you. I can't just watch you fade. She opened her eyes then, dark, glassy, yet burning with desperate understanding. Better I die, she rasped. Then they wake. A gust of wind rattled the window shutters, and both men flinched. The fire hissed and guttered low. The whole house seemed to listen. Tom stepped back, shaking his head. I told you, Cole, she's cursed. Leave it. Let her go! Cole turned on him, eyes flashing. You shut your mouth. She's a person, not some ghost story. But as he looked back at Naya, the truth clawed at him. Her face was changing, gaunt, hollowed, the flesh around the wound pulsing faintly. Almost moving. It wasn't natural. No fever did that. No sickness spread with that whispering hum he'd begun to hear even when the wind was still. He stood pacing the room like a trapped animal. If I don't do something, she dies. If I do, maybe I kill her faster. Damn it, Tom, what kind of choice is that? Tom's voice cracked. The kind the world's full of, boy. Some things you can't fix. Cole's fists clenched. He looked again at Naya, her body trembling in the sheets. Her eyes rolled toward him, half-lidded, but she still found strength to whisper, Promise me. You won't. He hesitated. Then he said softly, I promise. But promises made to the dying are made in weakness, and weakness bends easy under guilt. That night, a storm crawled in from the west, low thunder rolling across the plains. Rain lashed the windows, and lightning flashed white through the cracks in the shutters. Cole sat alone by her bed while Tom dozed by the hearth. Each time lightning lit the room, he saw the wound glisten. The cloth around it moved, not from her breathing, but as if something beneath it was trying to push free. He reached out, trembling, and pressed his palm against it. The hum pulsed through his skin, a vibration that climbed up his arm and into his bones. He pulled back, gasping. The bandage bulged once more, and Naya whimpered. Her fevered hand caught his sleeve. Don't! Lightning flared again, and in that moment he saw it. Thin lines of red light crawling under her skin, spreading from the wound like veins of fire. The sight broke him. Mercy and terror warred inside his chest. I can't, he whispered. I can't just let you suffer like this. Tears streaked through the grime on his face as he reached for the knife on the nightstand. He slid it beneath the bandage, breath shaking. Naya's eyes flew open, wide with horror. Please, don't pull it! But he did. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the room filled with a sound like wind tearing through stone, a cry that wasn't hers alone, but many voices, all screaming at once. The lamp shattered. The walls shook. Tom bolted upright, shouting Cole's name, but his words were lost in the storm's roar. Cole stared at the arrowhead in his hand, black metal slick with blood, and felt the ground shudder beneath his boots. He understood too late. She hadn't begged for herself. She'd been begging for them. The instant the arrowhead came free, the world seemed to stop breathing. For one heartbeat, there was only silence, the kind that feels alive, stretched so thin it hums. Then Naya screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was layered, as if a dozen voices burst from her throat at once, each howling in a different tongue. Cole staggered back, the arrowhead slick in his trembling hand. The lamps flared, spitting sparks. The shadows in the corners deepened, thick and writhing like smoke that didn't need fire. The air turned cold enough to frost his breath. "Cole!" Tom shouted from the doorway, but his voice was swallowed by the noise that filled the room. A low, droning roar that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Naya arched off the bed, her eyes rolling back until only white showed. Her veins glowed faintly beneath her skin, red and black and pulsing, as though something crawled inside her trying to escape. The blood pouring from the wound was wrong, dark, oily, glinting like tar in the lamplight. Cole dropped the arrowhead and rushed to her side, desperate. "Naya, God help me, I didn't mean to—" She seized his wrist with inhuman strength. Her eyes snapped open, but they weren't hers anymore. They gleamed like obsidian mirrors, reflecting the lamplight but giving nothing back. Her voice came through gritted teeth, trembling and furious. "You freed them." Then she went still. The silence returned. Cole froze, staring down at her limp body. For a long second he thought it was over, that she'd simply died. Then the house itself groaned. The floorboards swelled and cracked under his boots. The wind outside rose into a shriek that rattled the glass. Tom stumbled in, gun drawn. "What in hell did you do?" Before Cole could answer, the windows exploded inward, showering them with glass. The lamp snuffed out all at once, plunging everything into pitch darkness. Through the broken window came the desert wind, but it carried whispers now. Soft at first, then louder, overlapping, hundreds of them. Cole turned toward the sound. "Tom, light the lamp!" Tom struck a match, but the flame guttered and died in his hand. "It won't catch!" Then something moved in the doorway behind them, tall, shifting, barely outlined by the faint blue light that bled in from outside. The air grew thick with the smell of wet earth and blood. Cole snatched up his rifle, heart pounding. "Who's there?" No answer, only the whispering. Then a shape coalesced in the dark, a long human-like shadow that leaned toward him, its head cocked as though studying him. "Get back!" Tom fired into the dark. The gunshot cracked the silence, but the shadow didn't move. It didn't even flinch. Instead, it turned its face, or what might have been a face, toward the sound, and the whispering became laughter. Cole grabbed Tom by the arm. "We're leaving, now!" They stumbled out into the storm. The sky had gone wrong, heavy clouds swirling in a spiral above the ranch, lightning flashing without thunder. The cattle were gone, the corral splintered. The ground itself seemed to pulse beneath their feet, each tremor matching the faint heartbeat of the earth. Then came the voice. It was Naya's, carried on the wind, soft but clear. "You pulled it, Cole." He turned back toward the house. Through the shattered window, he saw her standing. Her head hung low, her hair whipping in the wind, her dress clinging to her thin frame. "God Almighty," Tom whispered. "She's dead. I saw her die." But Naya was moving, slowly, stiffly, and her shadow stretched across the ground behind her, impossibly long, splitting into many. Cole stared in horror. "Run!" The sky opened, wind screaming like 1,000 voices. The ground cracked, and as they fled into the storm, Cole realized the truth. Whatever had been trapped inside that arrow, whatever Naya had carried in her blood, was free now, and it wasn't done with him. The storm tore through the desert all night, a savage, howling thing that refused to die. When morning came, it left behind a silence even more unsettling than the chaos. The land was still, the sky gray and bruised. Dust clung to everything like ash. Cole and Tom hadn't slept. They'd spent the night huddled in the barn, rifles across their laps, listening. Sometimes the wind would rise again, soft, circular, and with it came that whispering sound, faint but constant, like 100 voices murmuring prayers in languages older than time. Cole's face was gray with exhaustion. He sat near the barn door, staring out toward the house. Smoke still curled from the broken chimney. "She's in there," he said quietly. Tom spat into the dirt. "What's in there ain't her no more." Cole looked down at his hands. Dried blood crusted his knuckles, black and sticky. He couldn't remember whether it was hers or his. The memory of Naya's face, pale, glowing, those dark eyes turning hollow, replayed again and again in his mind like a punishment. Tom rose, restless. "We ride for town. Tell the marshal what happened." Cole's laugh was hollow. "You think the marshal's gonna believe me?" "Sir, there's something living in the wind, and I let it out by pulling an arrow from a girl's arm." "They'd lock me up before I finished the sentence." Tom's jaw tightened. "Then what, Cole? We sit here waiting to die?" Before Cole could answer, the horses screamed. Both men spun toward the sound. Inside their stalls, the animals reared and kicked, eyes wild, nostrils flaring white. One of them threw itself against the fence, shattering it in a frenzy of terror. "Easy!" Cole shouted, rushing forward. But as he reached for the reins, the air shifted. The same cold pressure he'd felt before the storm. The wind began to move without sound, circling them inside the barn. Tom backed toward the door, eyes wide. "It's here." Cole felt it too. The temperature dropped fast, their breaths fogging the air. Dust rose from the ground and spun into a tiny vortex, rising higher until it took shape. A column of twisting air that darkened as it condensed. The horses screamed again and bolted, tearing through the open gate into the desert. The column followed their motion, as if watching, and then it whispered. Cole heard his name in it, clear as day. "Cole!" His blood turned to ice. Tom raised his rifle with shaking hands. "Stay back!" he shouted at the wind, but his words sounded foolish the moment they left his mouth. The vortex collapsed and then surged forward, striking him full in the chest. He was thrown backward, his body slamming into a support beam. When Cole rushed to him, Tom's eyes were open but glassy, his mouth forming words that didn't sound like English. "Tom! Tom, stay with me!" Cole shook him, but the old man's skin had gone cold. Something black trickled from his nose, not blood, but shadow. It evaporated before it touched the ground. Then came laughter. Naya's voice again, but not hers. It was too deep, too many voices speaking through her tone. "You freed us, rancher. Now you'll feed us." Cole stumbled back, choking on terror. The barn walls began to moan, wood bending as though pressed from the outside by invisible hands. He grabbed his rifle and ran. Outside, the wind was rising again, swirling dust into walls of motion that danced across the plain. Within those walls, shapes flickered, human outlines, distorted and translucent. Faces that weren't faces. Eyes that burned faint red in the gloom. Cole fell to his knees, the rifle slipping from his grasp. He looked up at the sky, at the swirling gray mass above the ranch, and realized with bone-deep certainty, this wasn't just a haunting, it was a reckoning. The curse Naya had carried was free, and the desert itself had become its voice. By nightfall, Cole's ranch was no longer his own. The wind hadn't stopped since morning. It moved in lazy, deliberate circles, tugging at the fences, rattling the windows, whispering through the cracks in the walls like something alive. The cattle were gone, the horses scattered. The desert stretched empty and endless, but Cole could feel it watching him. He sat alone in the main house, a lantern burning low on the table beside a bottle of whiskey. The rifle rested across his knees. Every few minutes he would glance toward the doorway where Naya had lain the night before. The bloodstain on the floor hadn't dried. It seemed darker now, glistening faintly even in the weak light. He took another drink and tried not to think. But the mind never stays still in fear. It plays tricks. He thought he saw movement in the window glass. Not his reflection, but another shape behind it. Taller. Thinner. "Stop it," he muttered to himself, rubbing his face with trembling hands. "Ain't real. Ain't—" Then the whisper came again. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It came from everywhere. The walls, the floorboards, the bottle, even the air itself. "Cole." He froze. The sound carried the weight of her voice, but layered beneath it were others. Hundreds of voices, blending, echoing, shifting in tone and language. He rose slowly, rifle in hand. "Naya, that you?" No answer, only wind seeping through the broken shutters. Then came a sound from upstairs. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. Cole's skin crawled. The stairs creaked under his boots as he climbed, each step seeming to echo for miles. The air grew colder with every breath. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched longer than it ever had before. Wrong, impossible, like the house had grown in the night. "Naya?" His voice cracked. A door at the end stood open, swaying gently, though there was no breeze. Cole raised the lantern and stepped closer. Inside was the guest room, her room, still as she'd left it. The bed was unmade, the window curtains fluttering, and there, lying neatly folded on the table, was her shawl. Cole stepped closer. It was torn at the edges, stained dark near the center, but beneath it, the arrowhead glinted faintly. The same one he'd pulled free. His breath caught. He reached for it, and a hand closed over his wrist. He spun. Naya stood behind him. Or what had once been her. Her skin was pale as bone, her eyes bottomless voids. Her hair floated as if under water, moving on a wind he couldn't feel. When she spoke, her lips didn't move. "You broke the seal!" Cole stumbled back, heart hammering. You said not to pull it, but you were dying." "I was holding them. I was the seal." Her voice was sorrow now, mingled with the whisper of others. "When you freed me, you freed them too." Cole shook his head. "Tell me how to stop it." "I'll do anything." Naya's eyes softened for just a moment, a flicker of the woman she'd been. "You can't stop it, Cole. You can only contain it again." "How?" But her form began to fade, her face turning to dust in the lantern light. "You'll know when the desert stops breathing." Then she was gone. The shawl dropped to the floor. Cole knelt, shaking, the arrowhead gleaming at his feet. Outside, the wind rose into a shriek that rattled every bone in his body. The ranch groaned as if alive, the walls flexing, the timbers bending. He looked around the house, realizing what Naya had meant. The ranch wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was the ghost. And now, it wanted him too. By dawn, the wind was gone. Completely gone. No breeze, no rustle of sand, no whisper through the dying grass. The stillness was suffocating. Cole stepped out onto the porch and realized, with a chill down his spine, that even the desert insects had gone silent. The world was holding its breath. The air hung heavy and wrong, like it had weight. Every sound, the creak of the porch, the thud of his boots, seemed too loud, too sharp. In that silence, he finally understood what Naya had meant. "You'll know when the desert stops breathing." The curse wasn't gone. It was waiting, watching. He gripped the arrowhead in his palm, its edges biting into his skin. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. His eyes were sunken, his lips dry and cracked, but his mind burned with a single thought. Contain it again. Whatever it was, he scanned the horizon, the sand dunes, the dry riverbed, the jagged silhouettes of rock and cactus. The land was barren, lifeless, except something was moving out there. At first, he thought it was heat shimmer, but the morning air was cool. The movement grew, shapes forming, tall, thin figures rising from the ground, dust peeling away from their bodies like ash. They weren't walking. They were drifting. Cole stumbled back into the house, slamming the door. The wood shuddered against an invisible force. He looked around the room, at the shawl, at the empty chair where Naya had sat, at the faint outline of the blood stain still seeping through the floorboards. His heart pounded as understanding began to take shape. Naya hadn't just been wounded. She'd been bound. The arrowhead hadn't killed her. It had sealed something inside her. Something ancient, older than the desert itself. And now that it was free, it needed a new vessel. A chill swept through the room. The lantern flickered and died, though no wind touched it. The whisper came again, low and coaxing. "You opened the door, Cole. Let us in." He raised the rifle, voice shaking. "You stay out of me, you hear? You stay out!" Laughter rippled through the room, soft at first, then louder, echoing from every wall. He backed toward the fireplace, clutching the arrowhead. The metal burned his hand, searing hot. He dropped it with a cry. The instant it hit the floor, the boards split open. A black mist began to rise, thick, oily, pulsing like a living thing. Faces formed in it, screaming silently. Cole staggered back. "No! No, God, no!" The mist surged upward, coiling into a single column that towered before him. The temperature dropped to freezing. Every breath crystallized in the air. In the swirling darkness, he saw Naya's face, fleeting, pained. "Contain it," she whispered, and then she was gone again, pulled into the vortex. Cole understood. The seal wasn't the arrow, and it was her. A living vessel. That was the only way to hold the darkness. It needed blood. It needed a body to cage it. His hands shook as he reached for the arrowhead, still glowing faintly on the floor. The metal burned again, but he didn't let go. He pressed it against his palm until blood welled up. The mist reacted instantly, twisting toward him, hungry. "All right," he said hoarsely. "If it's me you want—" "You got me!" He pressed the bloody arrowhead to his chest, right over his heart. Pain exploded through his body. He screamed, a sound that tore through the still air like thunder. The mist collapsed inward, rushing into him, filling him, clawing at his insides. The desert outside trembled once, a deep rumble that rolled through the sand like an exhale. Then silence returned. Cole collapsed to his knees, the arrowhead cooling in his palm. His breathing slowed. When he lifted his head, his eyes glowed faintly red, and the wind began to move again. The desert was breathing once more. But now, it breathed him. The desert never forgot. Cole Braddock woke alone on the dry riverbed, the first light of dawn painting the sand in pale gold. His body ached as if he'd run for days without stopping. But when he lifted his head, he realized he wasn't alone. Or rather, he was alone in the way that terrifies a man. The land itself seemed alive, watching, waiting. The ranch lay in ruins behind him. Smoke still rose from the chimneys, but the buildings were twisted, warped almost beyond recognition. The wind whispered through the skeletons of fence posts, carrying a sound he now recognized, soft, patient, and full of voices. The voices of those Naya had carried. Cole rose to his feet, the arrowhead still cold in his palm. His chest ached, and when he touched it, he felt a pulse. Not his own, but something deeper, slower, older. The darkness, the spirits, the power that had once surged through Naya now surged through him. He had become the vessel, the seal, the keeper of the wind. He remembered the moment the desert stopped breathing, the realization that to contain the curse, he would have to carry it. His mind shivered at the memory of the black mist, of Naya's fleeting face twisted in agony as it was drawn into the vortex. And now her sacrifice, or perhaps his own, had bound him to the desert in the same way. Cole looked toward the horizon. The dunes stretched endless, but the air had changed. Every grain of sand seemed to hum beneath his feet, vibrating with the presence of countless spirits. The wind twisted around him like fingers, tugging gently, nudging him to rise, to walk, to guide it. He understood fully that he would never leave this land again. Not really. The desert had claimed him, but not to destroy, to protect. Every whisper, every flicker of movement in the wind was part of the balance he now held. He felt them, the ones Naya had carried, the spirits of the dead wronged by soldiers, the restless souls of the desert. They were bound, but not silent, and he was their keeper. Cole's lips moved, not in words, but in the old language he had never learned, a rhythm and tone that seemed to flow naturally, as if the desert itself spoke through him. The wind responded, rising in gentle swirls, lifting dust and sand into tiny spirals. It was a language older than men, older than towns, older than the soldiers who had tried to take this land. He moved across the dunes, each step deliberate. The ruins of the ranch shrank behind him, but he did not look back. The spirits whispered warnings and guidance, and he listened. He did not fear them anymore. He understood his role. The balance depended on him. Time passed differently here. Days, nights, weeks, they blurred. Cole's flesh remained human, but the pulse beneath his chest was different now, steady, eternal, tied to the desert itself. The arrowhead he carried was no longer just metal. It was a symbol, a focus for the restless forces he contained. When travelers later crossed the riverbed near the ruins, some swore they felt the air watch them. Others heard whispers through the wind, like a voice carried across the dunes, gentle, warning, sad. "Do not disturb the seal," it said. Cole Braddock walked among the spirits of the desert, unseen and eternal. The keeper of the wind, bound to Naya's sacrifice, bound to the arrow, bound to the lives of countless restless souls. The desert breathed through him, and he would never falter. He had become both guardian and prisoner, a solitary figure maintaining the fragile balance between the living and the dead, between freedom and chaos. And so the wind blew, endlessly, carrying whispers of warning and memory. Travelers avoided the ruins. The desert slept lightly but watched closely. And Cole, once just a rancher, now something more, continued his vigil. The keeper of the wind, silent, eternal, bound to the desert, bound to the secrets of blood and spirit, a living seal against the darkness he had unleashed and contained.